So I saw Monica do this, and I saw Lena do this. I will have both their channels down below. These are both wonderful booktubers who I adore, and they're doing the Get to Know the Sci-Fi Reader book tag, which there is a fantasy one going around and maybe a romance one. I don't know. I was thinking about this one, and I just thought it'd be fun. Now, I didn't prepare for this tag, so we're back to old Angela not preparing for tags, but hopefully I will have some reasonable answers for these questions. So 1, what is your sci-fi origin? How you came to read your first sci-fi novel? And this was hard for me. I feel like most people would be like Animorphs or something like that, but for me it was Replica. So I'll have the first book here. This is Amy number 7. She's like a part of a clone group of Amy's, and they're really like superhero, like middle grade teenagers, and I don't know, it was really cool. It was really thrilling and suspenseful because she's like trying to hide from this organization. And there's even like a book that was like an episode of Survivor, I think. I don't know. I loved that series. I bought all the books from Half Price Books. I have them still stored away somewhere. That was probably the start. And then I don't think I read a lot of science fiction until graduate school, but I consumed a lot of it. So like I'm wearing my, this is the TARDIS/changing booth for Superman, which are 2 sci-fi things I grew up with a lot. I think I watched almost every television show that had a Superman thing in it, like Lois and Clark and Smallville. I watched all the original Supermans with my dad. We had the Sci-Fi Network on all the time, or Sci-Fi Channel. Right now it's called Sci-Fi or something. But we watched a bunch of Star Trek Next Generation, a bunch of movies he thought were kid appropriate but were not, like Mars Attack, which terrified me as a child. So like through TV and movies, I consumed a bunch of science fiction, but for some reason with books, I just didn't. Probably because my dad was more of the science fiction reader and he liked scarier things, so I stayed away from all the stuff he liked, and my mom was more of a, I guess, I don't even know how I got into fantasy now. I'll have to do that fantasy book tag eventually, but that's where I like got started. And then I think in grad school, I started like everyone. Not everyone, but I picked up The Martian. I picked up Ender's Game. I picked up Hyperion from a book club, and that kind of got the ball rolling for me. And I was already familiar with these stories, and I think it wasn't until I read Foundation and then Dune that I felt really like I was a science fiction reader and that I really loved this genre. I think, always will have a higher place in my heart for fantasy, but I really love all the unique stories, and for me, I'm still discovering tropes all the time that are my favorites, so I guess that's my science fiction origin story. It probably doesn't help that my job is very sciencey, so sometimes if I'm in an escapism mood, I don't need to learn new science, I'd rather learn new magic. If you could be the hero in a sci-fi novel, who would be the author, and what's one trope you'd insist be in the story? Ooh, there's a lot of good ones for this. I'm trying to think. I think I'm going to go with N.K. Jemisin because I love her writing, if you didn't know. And the trope I'd insist, and I don't think she's actually done this trope in works I've read yet, but I want to have the like disembodied voice companion trope. So whether that's like an AI companion who like talks to me in an earpiece, or like an inanimate object that has sentience of some sort because of the technology, or a revenant, I don't know. I want a disembodied side character to help me on this adventure, whatever's happening. I also kind of want to be in a fish out of water scenario. I think that'd be really fun. So yeah, I mean, you'd think I'm saying all these things that I should pick Yoon Ha Lee, but I think I'm still concerned about the characters in Yoon Ha Lee's books. So I think I'm gonna go with N.K. Jemisin because she is like one of my favorite science fiction authors. What is a sci-fi you've read this year that you want more people to read? Oh my goodness, there's probably so many. I guess off the top of my head, I could say 9 Fox Gambit because I've been yelling at you guys about 9 Fox Gambit for a while. But I think I'm going to go with Exhalation by Ted Chiang instead. I have a review for this. This is it is my favorite short story collection ever. The way Ted Chiang writes short stories for science fiction is such a great combination of classic science fiction, like the introspective philosophical thinking with scientific ideas, but also gives you characters to latch on to, so that this is the one. And if you could only read one story from this collection, like say you really just don't have the time, I would do The Life Cycle of Software Objects. I think that's the one I'd want people to read, although I think my favorite is, what's it called? The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling. I just love this collection. I mean, I'm just like flipping through and I want to read them all again now. But yeah, so that's the one that I would like you guys to read, but also 9 Fox Gambit. It is really good. What is your favorite sci-fi subgenre? What subgenre have you not read much from? This is hard because I still feel like I'm getting grounded in science fiction. Dude, I don't know. I guess my favorite would probably be space opera because that has the most bones of fantasy world building, because when you're in a space opera there's a lot of opportunity for new cultures and world building because you're traveling through space to different places. I love Star Trek, I love Doctor Who, all of these are kind of like travel through space sort of stories, so I really like those. A genre I don't get into as much might be military sci-fi. I have liked a lot of military sci-fi, like The Light Brigade by Cameron Hurley, I've really liked, and stuff like that, but I also sometimes find them to be kind of not predictable. They kind of talk about similar themes a lot of the time, you know, power, corruption, and like not trusting the authority, and whether the authority has the interest of the people in mind. Like that happens a lot. Like there's a component of that in the Machinery's Empire series, and I don't mind it, but I don't feel like that's as the focus, even though we're with the military a lot. I don't know, it's weird, but if you had to make me ask, also sometimes classic sci-fi. I don't mind classic sci-fi. I've read a fair bit of it, but it is dry. It is a very dry writing style, and I have to be in the mood. Like I cannot just pick up classic sci-fi unless I'm in the mood. Doesn't matter how many lists I've put it on, if you couldn't tell from Second Foundation being on TBRs for forever before I finished it. Who is your auto-buy sci-fi author? For this one, I think I'm going to go with Rivers Solomon. So I've read both of their published works. I don't think I've read the novelette, but I've read The Unkindness of Ghosts and The Deep. Some people might argue this is fantasy, but this is definitely science fiction world building. I don't know, I really, really love this story. I don't buy novellas often, and I don't buy them in hardcover often, but I bought that one. And Unkindness of Ghosts was also really well written. I do own that one, but I don't know where it is. I think it's somewhere in my Cleveland house somewhere. And I will buy and read anything that they come out with because I feel like they're really good at using science fiction in the way I like the genre to be used, which is to look into issues, but through a science fiction lens. So that's what I love with science fiction, and I think they have a wonderful writing style, and especially in The Deep. Like, I really loved The Deep. How do you typically find sci-fi recommendations? Before BookTube, I found them probably just on the internet. I think before BookTube, I found a book blog that had like all the science fiction books coming out in 2019, and that's how I found The Light Brigade, because I was like, I'm kind of catching up on my backlog, and I want to read some releases that come out this year so I can maybe vote in the Goodreads award, because I don't typically vote unless I've like at least read some of them. And so that's how I found The Light Brigade, how I found The City in the Middle of the Night, which was not as much of a hit for me. And so that's what I did before, and now I just have BookTube, so I have like all of the options. I get a lot from Ryan because he does a lot of research, and then he finds science fiction and he tells me if I'll like it. So like some Philip K. Dick, he's given me like Ubik and things like that. Ryan is also who gave me Exhalation by Ted Chiang. So I definitely find them from a variety of places now, depending on what my mood is for, but BookTube is a big part of that. What is an upcoming sci-fi release you're excited for? And this one's hard. I guess if you had to tell me, it would be the sequel to A Memory Called Empire. Don't remember the name of it. It's by Arcady Martin, and I really, really liked that book, so I'm really excited for the sequel, especially with where it left off. That is a really good story of assimilation and the culture and what it means to, what memory can mean to different cultures, and the falling of an empire. And it was really good. I really liked it. So the sequel is coming out next year, I think. So I guess that might be the one that I'm most excited for, because I don't read as many sci-fi series, and I'm never in the know for many sci-fi releases. I'm not a big up-to-date on releases person for that. What is one misconception about sci-fi you would like to lay to rest? Oh, that you have to be good at science to like it? I don't know if that actually is one, but I do know a lot of people be like, oh, I wish I could read that, but it just all goes over my head. And yes, some science fiction will. I mean, gosh, if I could list for days the number of literary fictions that go over my head. Every genre has books that are going to require work and effort to really take away stuff from them, but you don't have to read those books. I have a video where I do all the sci-fi reads I did before BookTube, and I do feel like a lot of those are pretty good, like entry level, like The Martian, Jurassic Park, Ender's Game. Like a lot of these I feel are very accessible, and you don't need to know the science to enjoy the plot. Like, who goes to see Jurassic Park and knows how DNA works? I mean, Michael Crichton didn't know because we didn't know. Sort of thing. So I don't think you need to know science to appreciate it. You just have to find the stories that are either more character-driven, if that's your thing, or more plot-driven. Just don't find the ones that are like heavy in the sci-fi world-building elements. I think there's plenty of those that exist. I think Recursion by Blake Crouch was one I read this year that was definitely more like fast-paced, plot-focused, so you didn't need to understand the theories they were using to make their thing work. Like, you don't need to know... I mean, you already probably consume a lot of science fiction. You probably have seen many a superhero movie, and I am of the opinion that most superheroes are science fiction-based characters. You can have some that are more fantastical, but I feel like at least a lot of the popular ones, I mean, Spider-Man gets bitten by a radioactive spider, that's very science fiction. So I just think that premise that there's this gatekeeping sense, and you also do not have to read the classics. You can choose to, but you don't have to. That just depends on what you want. Sometimes I just want to know how a genre that I care about gets to where I am, so I'll dive into the classics, but that's just a personal choice. You can read only current releases, you can maybe only read books that came out in the 90s if that's your thing. I just don't think you have to do something to be a sci-fi reader. So I think those are misconceptions, because I feel like some people are like, oh, you can't talk about sci-fi if you haven't read, what's his name, something Clark. I haven't read anything by him. But I feel like I'm pretty well read in sci-fi, and I don't need to read all of the sci-fi by all the old white men. Like, there's some of them are very good, and some of them are very not good. Looking at you, Brave New World. Looking at you. 9. If someone had never read a sci-fi before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that come to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? Oh, I already kind of said this, so a lot of them would be on that video that I already pointed to, but so if you want to start with hard sci-fi, I'd start with The Martian. I think The Martian's extremely accessible. It's a really quick read. You'll feel accomplished. And it doesn't feel watered down. Like, you can care about the botanist stuff or you can skim over it. I think that's a really good place to start for hard sci-fi. If you want military sci-fi, I'd go Ender's Game a little bit, maybe. Yeah, I think that one's, because that one's more young adult, and it definitely has you more like the training background, like you have the strategy kind of removed from the action. And I'm trying to think of a good starter space opera. I feel like I worked up to space opera. Well, if you are a fantasy reader, and if you're a fantasy reader who values world building, then I would read Dune. Because I do feel that Dune isn't necessarily like a starter science fiction book, if you are just jumping into science fiction from maybe more of a contemporary historical fiction reading background, or if maybe you haven't read a book in a long time and you want to start science fiction, I wouldn't start with Dune. But if you're someone who's like, oh, I've been reading fantasy for years, but I want to try science fiction, I do feel like Dune is pretty accessible to you and a great space opera. And in 2021, we will have a movie that looks so cool, but the world building in Dune is really good. And I also think that this is a very good starting book too, because Ted Chiang has a way of looking at concepts, I feel, in a very accessible and like tight way. I don't want to say simple, but it makes you think they're simple. I don't know how to explain it, but like there's a story in here that's basically Neopets, okay? Like I really, really love Exhalation by Ted Chiang. I don't even know what genre of sci-fi he is, but like I will read anything. He's another auto-buy author. I would read anything he comes out with. I actually own his 2 short story anthologies, right? So, who is the most recent sci-fi reading content creator you came across that you'd like to shout out? So, I think for this, I am just going to talk about Shannon from That's So Poe and Tori from Tori Morrow. I'm pretty sure that's the channel name. And I like both of them for their science fiction content. I feel like they are the people I get my most recent, like, recommendations from that I put on my Goodreads, including Monica and Lena. I feel like those are the people I really like pull from. It's really hard to find people who only do science fiction, and I don't find many new people for that often. But those are the ones that, yeah, Tori Morrow and Shannon from That's So Poe. Oh, and Kalinati, Rachel Kalinati. Those are the 3 channels where, like, they consistently are reviewing and talking about science fiction books, and my ears perk up, and I, like, maybe add it to my thing. I'm also way behind on Emily Fox Train. I didn't know she existed until like 3 weeks ago, so she's also someone, but you don't need me to tell you about her. You know about her. So that's this tag. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't, that's fine. I feel like one person I would love to tag for this, though, is Ramsey from Rajathon, because they also read a bunch of science fiction, and I want to hear their origin story, so Ramsey, you're officially tagged, but everyone else, just feel free. And other than that, if you made it this far, put like an alien emoji down below, or just say sci-fi, I don't know, just smiley face emoji. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.